I think if we all just realize that every action has a reaction, we would make better choices and small steps every day to be more conscious humans. And I think that's what it's going to take ultimately. And through Wild Elements, that's the hope, is to deliver this narrative in a way that engages people to want to take part of this conscious community, that engages people to want to be more compassionate and to really reconnect with the interconnection of everything on this planet.
I'm your host, Adam Met, and today we're talking to Nikki Islami, the founder of Bellamy Hair and Wild Elements. At 23, Nikki realized she didn't want to spend the rest of her life practicing law, so she took a huge leap and started a hair extension company, Bellamy Hair. Back in 2012, Nikki reached out to people on Instagram and offered them free extensions in exchange for reviews, which not only promoted Bellamy Hair, but also helped to create what we now know as influencers. This year, Nikki founded Wild Elements, an organization that brings together influencers and innovators to help people, animals, and our planet. We talk about how to pivot careers, how to achieve both sustainability and profit in business, and how to brand the climate movement. A quick reminder that we're planting a tree for every person who subscribes to this podcast, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. And without further ado, here is Nikki Islami on Planet Reimagined. I am so excited to talk to you today because your story is just an absolutely incredible one of so many different paths all happening at the same time. And there are so many young people who graduate with an undergrad degree or a master's degree and still don't know what they want to do with their lives. Can you start by telling us a little bit about what it was like to keep finding new callings over and over again?
Sure. So first of all, for anyone out there listening, it's totally fine to not know your calling right from graduation or pivot a couple of times during your lifetime. So for me, I obviously came from a Bachelor of Laws background. So I was a lawyer for a couple of years before making the transition into brand building. And that was about a decade ago. So that's where I've spent most of my time over the last 10 years. A couple of years ago, I started really thinking about the impact that I wanted to have on the world. And I kind of looked around and as this next pivot in my life, I looked at my skill sets and what did I have? I had this great research background from studying law. I had this ability to build a brand, engage audiences in new ways and new narratives, tap into culture and behavior. And I had this really passion for global well-being and conservation and environmentalism and sustainability and using business for good, and really trying to find a business strategy where you could do well and you could do good at the same time. And so a couple of years ago, as I was sort of grappling with where does the next stage of my career and journey take me, I really truly followed my heart. I said, okay, I'm 32 years old. I can, pivots don't scare me. I think that it's the exciting time where you have something new to tackle and something new to learn. And I kind of stopped and I said, where is my passion? And where do I want to spend the rest of my life? And I think, the first step is always the scariest. And someone actually gave me a quote one time and they said, it's good to be a penguin because penguins take the first leap into the ocean when they're pivoting on something. And I feel like that's what I've done lots of times throughout my career. So where I find myself now today is really where I want to be. It's how do you use business as a force for good? And how do I take all of those skill sets to create something?
I couldn't agree more on the law front because I'm finishing up my PhD now in law. And there's something about studying law that prepares you for everything, for business, and to be able to think critically through things. I couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. I think it's the idea that there's never a no for an answer. There's always a yes. And I think that's the perfect foundation that law gives you, is figure it out. There's always a way to figure it out.
Definitely. So I want to talk about a topic that some people might not think is directly related to sustainability, but we will definitely make the connection, I promise. Um, Influencer marketing. Now, I may
Mhm.
be so bold as to say that you were one of the innovators of this idea. And so with Bellamy Hair, you gave away a ton of hair extensions in exchange for reviews and people using them in photos and videos and talking about the product online. I'm curious where you think we are now in the world of influencer marketing, and if you still think it's a practical tool for both social and environmental change, as well as for building a business.
Absolutely. I mean, influencer marketing, I think, has changed so much over the last decade. When I started, it was really authentic. I think people turned on their cameras in their rooms and recorded a YouTube video or got on Instagram to share with their audience things that they've loved. I think throughout the years that sort of changed and it's become heavily monetized, for good and bad. I think where you're finding influencers and social platforms moving towards is that influencers are sort of stepping into this advocate role.
Hmm.
And advocacy has become a big part of those that want to take part in it and can use their platforms to really propel conversations, spark new ideas. And I think where social media is so critical in sustainability or environmental causes or just behavioral change is really it sets culture. And I think influencers really are setting the culture for a lot of the things, the behaviors that people can, the behaviors that people have, or um, the ideas that get propelled and the conversations that start. So, absolutely, I think there's a role for influencers in this world of social good and business. I think it's about finding people who are really authentic in what they are advocating on their platforms. And I think it's also critical to make sure that it's um, they're getting their facts from reliable sources. And that's part of one of the programs that we've set up at Wild Elements Foundation is our Wild Innovators and Wild Advocates program. So it's exactly that. It's taking social media marketing or social media and influencers and really giving them, pairing them with these conservationists, scientists, women on the front lines of change who can give them the information to really accelerate change by sparking conservation conversations and creating a more conscious community. I think wild advocates, at least our wild advocates that we put together, have an audience that's there to engage with them on all things beauty, fashion, wellness, fitness, sports. And they have such an authentic and human way of connecting with their audiences. And I think this is where the magic happens. I think a lot of times conversations around sustainability and environmentalism are lofty, they're big, they're confusing, it feels negative most of the time. And I think that what advocates can do and what social media can really propel is these conversations to be more digestible and to be really delivered in a way that makes sense to every person interacting with it.
Your point about influencers having their facts right is one that is not lost online anywhere. I think that, looking at influencers as experts in these fields is a very difficult thing for people to wrap their mind around. And you've provided this really interesting and creative solution to it. And we're going to talk more about your innovators later. I want to get into more detail about some of the projects because they are just incredible. But it is a great solution, and I'm looking forward to having more conversation about that. But the first thing I want to talk about is girls' education, because girls'
Yes.
education, particularly in developing countries, is one of the top things we can do to move towards a more socially, economically, and environmentally responsible future, especially after a disaster like a hurricane. The number one thing we can do is ensure, as we're rebuilding, that young girls are being educated. So, for you, why is focusing on girls and women led efforts important for your work?
So I think I have lived that. I have been a woman in commerce in the corporate world, and also just throughout all of my learnings of the past years, I've been interacting with a lot of amazing women on the front lines of change and conservation and environment, and have realized that, similar to women in the corporate world, that women-led efforts in the environmental space only receive 0.2% of total global foundation funding. So to change that trajectory, Wild Elements Foundation is investing 3 million in sustainability and conservation organizations, which are predominantly female-led. And I think that's so crucial to elevate female and women-led voices that are driving change on the front lines. And I'm committed to doing that.
That is amazing. So just to give all the listeners kind of a baseline and a primer, will you give us the kind of brief elevator pitch on Wild Elements?
Wild Elements Foundation is part of the larger Wild Elements ecosystem, and that's one that brings storytelling, business, and philanthropy together for positive change and maximum impact. We're really focused on engaging and activating new audiences in new ways, and I think that in this sort of ecosystem, we can engage and reach audiences in ways that nonprofit can't do on its own alone, and business can't do on its own alone.
Perfect. It sounds incredible. And three of your kind of core tenets of the organization, it's animal kind, humankind, and plant kind. And why these three categories and how do they relate to each other?
It's interesting because I think, this is a lofty goal, but the ultimate goal is restoring the balance between humanity and nature. And I think, as you put it, it's the symbiosis between what we call the power of three. And that's animal kind, humankind, and plant kind. And I think there's this beautiful interconnectivity between those three, which is why we call it the power of three. And it's something that I personally, through my journeys over the last couple of years of just trying to educate myself and visiting local communities, conservancies, and scientific institutions, I kind of came to this point where, and this seems like such a simple concept, but this idea of interconnectivity, that every action has a reaction. And what I learned was that while I was on this quest, and for me, it all started with animal conservation and protection, while I was on this quest to learn how to save animals or how to protect animals, I learned that for animals to thrive, we all must thrive. The agriculture, the people, the communities. There's this idea of one wellness and one health that we all share as our global well-being. And this idea that we're all interconnected and all have this one planetary health really kind of resonated with me. And I came back, and as I started sort of talking about this idea of restoring the interconnection of the power of three, I think more people than I assumed really stopped and kind of looked at themselves, and they're like, no, there is an interconnection. And I think if we all just realize that every action has a reaction, we would make better choices and small steps every day to be more conscious humans. And I think that's what it's going to take ultimately. And through Wild Elements, that's the hope, is to deliver this narrative in a way that engages people to want to take part of this conscious community, that engages people to want to be more compassionate and to really reconnect with the interconnection of everything on this planet.
Absolutely. And one of the things we talk a lot about on this podcast are the Sustainable Development Goals, which are 17 goals. That is an incredibly high number and really difficult to kind of wrap people's mind around. But they really are 17 interconnected goals that make it clear that everything from gender equality to water, to agriculture, to recycling, to life on land, life underwater, poverty, they are all interconnected. And you're not going to fully achieve one without achieving all of them. And you mentioned before partnerships. Partnerships is goal 17, and that plays its way across all of the different goals that we're trying to achieve. So this idea of interconnection is something that, is talked about, but isn't dived into deeply enough, because in academia and in so many other places, even in the nonprofit world, a lot, people are very much siloed. Like, I'm working on something that's only about this one specific idea, and I'm not looking at the larger conversation, and I'm not looking at how it connects to everything else. But this idea of interconnectivity needs to be so much more at the forefront of people's minds. And I love that this is the focus of what you're doing.
Absolutely. It's funny you say operating in a silo because I say that all the time. We're not operating in a silo, and we're living and interacting with all of these, um, all the way from other humans to other species to organisms to everything. Everything is an interaction that's based around, it's an interaction of one another. And that's funny you also bring that up, is because wild elements is really the origin of the name came from that. It's this idea that we're all wild elements, we're all from one source, and we're all made up of the same elements. So really kind of paying respect to that interconnection is crucial.
I want to dive into the wild innovators and wild advocates, because this area of wild elements got me so excited, because I really love pairing things that you wouldn't necessarily think go together to create the 1 + 1 = 3 idea. And so this is one of my favorite of your projects, because it highlights the passion and skills that individuals bring to the table for real change.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many people think about sustainability as either a solution that requires individual action or one that requires corporate and policy action. But these innovators and advocates help to bridge the gap between the two. Would you mind sharing a little bit about some of the projects that the innovators and advocates are working on?
Sure. So, and I think you're absolutely right. First of all, I think that's there's an untapped opportunity for us to shift culture by connecting these types of pairs. So there's so many. I mean, I love each one of our innovators and advocates. I think one off the top of my head is a, an organization called Farm Urban. They're based in the United Kingdom. And the innovators are Abigail and Jane, and we have partnered them with our advocate, Roddy. And the program is based on educating the next generation of sustainable urban agriculture.
Mm.
So it's based all around hydroponic farming. So it's the coolest setup that they have. It's an underground old Victorian tunnel in Liverpool that they've totally transformed to a hydroponic vertical farm. So not only do they provide fresh produce for the communities in that area, but they also provide education programs for the next generation on how to look at urban agriculture and hydroponics as a resource for growing fresh produce right under your feet, so to say, in Liverpool. So that program is really cool, and I think the innovator and advocates the two pair there have really hit it off, and it's pretty amazing to see the magic that happens when these two, three women have come together, the two on the innovator side and the one on the advocate, and just the sharing of information. And it was funny because even Roddy, I think right after that pairing with Abigail and Jane, got her own hydroponic lettuce grow and set that up and started sort of diving deep into what it means to grow hydroponic produce. Another pair of advocates and innovators is Liz Gillies and Rasan. So Rasan leads a program called the Awasa Lions program, and this is based in Kenya, and what she focuses on is promoting coexistence with lions and reducing human-lion conflict in Kenya. And the advocate is Liz Gillies, and she's an actress, and she's really, really passionate about animals and animal protection and conservation. So the two of them have really hit it off as a great duo to work together on amplifying the work that's being done. And you can meet all 10 of our pairings on foundation.wildelements.com. And there's a lot more information and specifics about each of the pairs.
Where do you see Wild Elements going next? You have so many things going on, but where do you see the path forward?
I mean, I think so. We're just getting started. We are a month in. We've launched the Wild Elements Foundation. I think, we're working with the Wild Elements Studios to tell these stories of the first 10 innovators that we have. We've worked through about half of them, and the next half will be filming the rest of this year. So it's really getting those out and working with our advocates in our community to elevate those voices. I think, again, I said it, it's lofty, but the reason why I'm doing this, and the whole team and everyone is on this wild elements in this wild elements journey, is that we have the ultimate goal of restoring the balance between humanity and nature. And I think the symbiosis between the power of three, animal kind, humankind, and plant kind. And we're doing it through culture change, narrative change, behavior change, policy change. And we believe in doing those synergistically that will achieve this goal.
It's incredible. It's an incredible platform. And where can people go to find out more information?
So you can reach us on wildelements.com or our Instagram at wildelements. This is where we're going to be sharing information and actions that they can take to learn more, get to know our innovators, ways to take the work they are doing and integrate it into your life, and just working on building a conscious and compassionate community. And excited to see everyone there.
Amazing. I love that because, when we talk to people on this podcast, it's a lot about, their projects and the amazing things that they're doing. But I love that you said that there are ways for people who are listening to integrate these projects into their life. Like the hydroponics project that you mentioned, it's something that can be done at home for people who are listening. So it's really great that there's a way to take these exciting things and then bring them to the individual level.
Absolutely. And I think that's really our motto, is also progress over perfection and one small step a day. I think all we can do is aspire to be more compassionate and conscious humans. And I think that's where we're going to see a positive change.
What an amazing and inspiring way to end our conversation today. Thank you so much for spending time with us. I'm sure everyone who's listening is going to be excited and inspired and want to go out and make a change and a difference in their community and the world. So thank you so, so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much.